Chale. Okay, let's begin. Now, introduction to PHP. We have been talking about JavaScript in previous class, and there are few things that are missing. Okay, in JavaScript that we have yet not discussed. But as I've told you previously as well, that those things are basically now going to be addressed with PHP or along with PHP. For example, form validation. We have not talked too much in detail about form validation. That will be talked within PHP as well. We will be talking about how we process the form and form data. And we will do client-side validation as well as server-side validation. Similarly, arrays and I think we have discussed arrays and string, but detailed arrays and regular expressions and lots of other features of JavaScript are still missing. Events are still missing. Some objects are missing in my previous discussions. I will be trying to record the previous lectures and add them in JavaScript as well. So some things will be there. Meanwhile, PHP, basically we will start that so that we can discuss few things as without PHP and we can start the course. Most of the concept with PHP is also similar. Initial concepts of PHP are similar to JavaScript, and if you have come from Java or any other things, for example, loops and conditionals, etc. So I've prepared only few slides and few examples for them so that we don't waste too much time in again studying if and else, which we already have done it. Okay. So our target is to go and understand how we use PHP to actually develop websites rather than just discussing if else and loops and small programs on that. Okay. So let's go further now. PHP, basically, we will be talking about various different issues. Introduction to PHP programming, what programming languages is, types of programs, and then so on and so forth. Okay. Obviously, we will install a server in the end, and we will see how we execute the basic codes of PHP. Now, what itself is PHP? PHP basically stands for PHP Hypertext Preprocessor. It's known as a recursive definition. By recursive definition means that within its word, it contains the acronym for it. Okay. So PHP itself stands for PHP Hypertext Preprocessor. So the first P stands for PHP itself, and then the H stands for Hypertext and Preprocessor. It's a tricky recursive definition. Recursive basically means it contains its own words within its own words, right? Basically, it's an open source platform, due to which it has become extremely popular in the world. Okay, majority of the industry, online industry, is now based on PHP. For one main reason being that it is open source, and we all know that open source is something that the entire community loves because you can easily control the code, you can easily navigate the code, you can easily modify the codes, you can easily develop your own custom codes, custom APIs, and custom frameworks on which various complex tasks can be performed. So that is why PHP has become extremely popular. We will be talking about how we can customize and what other frameworks we can use within PHP. So open source is one of the major benefits and advantages of using PHP. It is obviously a server-side programming. It's a cross-platform. It is a scripting language. Server-side meaning that it's a language that contains or resides on your server. It's executed actually on your server. It generates the output and then throws the output back to the client, and it's displayed there. So the actual decision making, actual processing of the data is done at the backend on your server. When we do HTML, we write the code, and that code is actually sent directly on the browsers to every single client. And HTML code is executed on the server's, on the client's PC, on every single client's PC. That is why it's called client language. Meaning that on every client's PC, the HTML gets executed. On every client's PC, the CSS gets executed. On every client's PC, the JavaScript gets executed. So every time a client visits a website, actually he gets the source code of it, and it's executed at runtime on his browser, and the data is displayed. That is why it's called client-side software. When we execute Windows, any application, basically the people program it, they compile it, they create an executable file, and then they give you the executable file. You basically execute that executable file. So it's a executable version. You don't get the source code of that actual file. However, once you execute HTML, PHP, HTML, CSS, or JavaScript, with these three things, the actual source code is sent to the client, and that source code is run at a runtime on the browser to generate the output on every single client. That is why we refer to them as client-side languages. However, the other aspect of it is known as server-side languages. Server-side languages being PHP, for example, ASP.NET, for example, Java servlets, for example. These are languages that actually are executed at the backend on the servers. They make the decision, they process the data, they generate the output based on your feedback, and then they send the code to the client, which is then displayed on the client PC. So the actual processing is done at the backend. The client only sees the output in final form. Again, that output is generated in HTML form. So PHP technically, in the end, eventually generates an HTML code for the browser to display, because browsers are capable of only displaying directly the HTML and CSS JavaScript code. The PHP needs a server to process and then decide what needs to be printed. Okay, so that's why it's called a server-side printing. We will be talking more about this concept later on. So again, HTML, CSS, JavaScript is the client side, executes on the client side. PHP is the language that executes at the back end on your server. It is a cross-platform, meaning that once you write the code, you don't need to worry that whether the user is using Windows or Linux or Unix or Apple systems, whether it's using any Android machines or iOS machines. Any system in the world is basically capable of running PHP. That's why it has become a major popular way of programming language throughout the world. Okay. Obviously, we also use the word called it creates dynamic pages. By dynamic pages means that the content is dynamic based on user. Every time the user logs into this website, he will see different content, like your Facebook, like your Instagram, like your Twitter. These are dynamic websites, like your email address. Every time you log into your Facebook account, you see a different content on your wall. Or every time you log into your Instagram account, you see a different content on your blog. Every time you see log into your Twitter, you see a different tweets on your blog. That's because it's generating dynamic content at runtime based on users' preference. So every user gets to have different output. With HTML, CSS, JavaScript, every user gets to have a same output. The website would be exactly same for every single user in the world if it is based on HTML, CSS, JavaScript. If you use these three languages, you would be creating a website that is known as static, meaning it's exactly same for every single user around the world. However, if you use PHP or with the power of PHP, you are able to create a dynamic website that would change its content based on users' preferences. So every time a user visits, he will see different content, and every user in the world will also see different content, like your Facebook. Every user's Facebook wall is completely different based on the people he likes and follows. Every person, every client's Twitter wall is completely different based on the people they follow, the tweets they follow. So this preference is taken under consideration using PHP. So we create dynamic websites that would behave based on users' preferences. This is why PHP is used, and it's very simple, very easy to use. PHP first appeared in 1995 by Rasmus Lerdorf. He was the one of the initial founders or creators of this language. Initially, obviously, it was known as personal homepage, where the client can get their own personal page rather than single data being shared across everybody. So PHP was initially used as a personal homepage, which now is being known as PHP Hypertext Preprocessor. Okay. So now if I ask you for the definition of PHP, it's known as PHP Hypertext Preprocessor. So full form of PHP itself is PHP Hypertext Preprocessor. Okay. Then the further details of PHP can be found at php.net. You can go onto this website. You can download PHP and other resources as well. Why PHP? As of January 2013, PHP was installed on more than 244 million websites. Imagine it. Currently, more than 300 million. In fact, at the current moment, obviously the data is quite old. But by 2030, 244 million websites were using PHP, and 2.1 million web servers. The servers individually were also using PHP. One main reason: open source platform, it's free, it's easy to learn. Okay, that's the major advantages. We already talked about what's open source. Anybody can use it. It's free, anybody can use it. Okay, open source, anybody can use, access its source code, change its source code, process it, and it becomes so easy to modify and create your own custom frameworks. Similarly, it's a cross platform. It runs on every single Windows system, Linux system, Apple system, on your mobile phones, on your iPads, on your tablets. Every PHP application is capable of running almost on every single device. Similarly, the major aspect of it's become so popular was that it's also extremely easy to learn as well. Okay, if you already know a few of basic things, it's extremely easy. Currently, in terms of web market, 81% of websites are based on PHP. Okay, that is why if you are looking for becoming a web developer, it's so essential to use or to learn PHP, because 81% of your international market is based on PHP. Second, ASP.NET occupies almost 16%. Java, Java servlets, Java struts, again programming server-side languages, but now only 3% of website resides and uses on Java systems. Static files, Cold Fusion, Ruby, Perl, JavaScript, Pure. Python is quickly becoming popular, but still the entire website structure is very limited, 0.2%. This is approximately January 2016 data. Okay, got from W3 Text. I think I should have checked the latest data, but you can check the latest data from this website as well, w3text.com. So Python is quickly becoming popular. So do keep an eye on that. We might be using Python in after a couple of years completely, and PHP might be overrun by Python. But till then, PHP already is occupying 81%. So if you are going into web development, it's 81% required that you use PHP. There are 15% chances that people might ask you for ASP or some other languages. So that's one major thing. Country-wise, US again uses PHP 29%, Germany, Russia, these are major countries that use PHP wise. Okay. So as you can see, Japan and US and Russia, if they hold the 75%, if I go market share, all of them use PHP. Itself, PHP country distribution programming into programming languages market share. Okay, this is not the heading, this is the heading. Programming language market share, PHP basically uses almost 70% here, and then the remaining 20% is basically belonging to other languages. Okay, this is market share in terms of finance. Okay, in terms of job market, you can say. What is itself a language? What do we mean by what are languages? So a language is a system of communication commonly used to exchange knowledge, opinion, commands, and feelings. This is a general definition, in fact. I have found it, but okay, sorry. This is a general definition of a language, that if we, not in terms of programming language, just any language, for that matter being English, Urdu, or any other language, that a language is a system of communication and so on and so forth. Okay, it can be written, oral, gestural, or kind of any other communications. The problem is, this is a language, or the definition we use when we communicate with each other in a human form. How do we talk to computers? Okay, what language, or in other words, what programming language is required to talk to computers? We all know that in order to communicate with the computer, we need some form of language, which is technically referred to as computer language or programming language, that allows us to communicate with computer. Now, what programming language, or what is a programming language? A programming is the ability to take the idea in your head, break it into parts, into individual pieces, and know how to write those pieces. Okay, that's a simple definition of a programming. That being able to generate an idea in your head, then break that idea into individual small units, and then write those units with that particular format. For example, you need to reach from point A to point B. What steps, what direction, what things I need to do. I need to write this. I need to break it into pieces. What is to be done in step 1, what is to be done in step 2, what is to be done in step 3, and then I need to be able to write those steps in a particular language. For example, if I need to add 200 plus 300, then I need to understand that how I'm going to process that. Okay, how I'm going to take a variable x from one point and move it to the next step. Similarly, in programming languages, we use something called statements. For example, is a language called BASIC. Okay, BASIC is a language initially used in 1980s and 1990s. Nowadays, it doesn't exist anymore. But in a basic language, in order to declare this variable or this value 500, what we need to do is we need to use a statement called let balance is equal to 200. Then there was an Apple language called AppleScript. It used a statement called set balance to 500. Then if you use a Java, in Java we use a variable called balance, for example, is equal to 500. Then came COBOL. COBOL again is an old language used in 1990s and 70s. And within that language, we use the low-level commands called move 500 to balance. So this means that move 500 digits to the memory location of balance. This is how a variable declaration was done. In PHP, what we do is, we use the $ balance is equals to 50. $ represents the variable, balance being the variable name is equals to 500. So as you can see, the basic structure of programming has not changed. The point of saying and using this all is that language is something we use to communicate. When we talk about computers, we say we need a programming language. By programming language, we mean a language that allows us to break the problem into small pieces and solve that problem step by step using certain set of instructions. Okay? And those instructions basically haven't changed. If you take old language of 1980s from like BASIC and COBOL, you still would find that it follows almost the same pattern. For example, balance 500, balance to 500, balance is equal to 500, move to balance, and so on and so forth. However, obviously there are small changes within the code. If you reach PHP, again, the almost structure is same. We use the same variable, we use an operator, we assign it a value. This time the only change is that it uses a $ to identify the variable, that this is a particular variable or a function name. Okay. So if you understand the previous, or if you're coming from previous languages, PHP also uses the same structure. We create a variable, we assign it a value. We'll talk about variables in detail. So if we redefine what is a programming language is a set of rules that provides a way of telling computer what operations to perform. So programming language tells the computer what to do step by step, instruction by instruction. Okay. And when we talk about these programming languages, there is a huge list of various different programming languages available. And if I will not go on through all of them, but you might have heard of C++, C language, nowadays C# is common. BASIC, I mentioned that we have BASIC available. Other than that, throughout the times, dozens of languages have been created. All these languages are created to communicate with computer one way or another, one task to another. Whether it's software-based, Windows-based, hardware-based, or server-based languages, they all provide various different functionalities. Nowadays, we commonly heard these major 5-7 languages: C, C++, C#, JavaScript, Perl, PHP, Python, Objective-C, Ruby, Visual Basics, and so on. Nowadays, these have become one of the most commonly used languages. So the structure of these languages is that we talk about machine code, or which is CPU. That machine code is transferred or directly interpreted using assembly language, which is considered as a low level language. Machine language or assembly language is basically something that directly communicates with your PC, directly communicates with your system. Then we have C language, C++, Objective, Java.NET, PHP, Ruby, and Python, and find JavaScript and actions. These are known as high level languages. Means we write the code in a human readable form, and which is automatically translated and communicated with PHP in your machine language code, which can be understood by the CPU. Okay, writing the source code. Now here, I believe my meeting time would be over, but let's just continue with that. So how do we write the code with respect to our online programming? So we have discussed JavaScript in previous class. In JavaScript, we write alert hello.html. Okay, we still have 3 minutes. So in JavaScript, we write something called alert hello.html. In JavaScript, we write something called hello. Astaghfirullah. Again, in JavaScript, we write something called alert or document.write or window.alert to generate the output. In Python, or we write say hello. For example, in Ruby, we write puts hello world. In Groovy, we write say hello world. Similarly, in PHP, we write the command in this way. For a PHP code to write, we need to use the brackets, the less than and greater than sign, starting with a question mark and PHP. This is the tag that we need to write before every single PHP code. In JavaScript, we need to write script tag that belong to HTML. If you are writing CSS, we need to write the style tag belong to HTML, telling the HTML web page that this point 4 there is a CSS code, or script means this is JavaScript code. However, for PHP, we write something called, bracket, level bracket starts, question mark, PHP. This is a specifically PHP tag. Within this PHP tag, we write the PHP script. Obviously, you can write this tag as many times as you want within a HTML page. You can write entire web page within your PHP as well. Within this PHP tags, we write the PHP code in order to generate the output. For example, in other languages, we use this word. Some say alert, say puts, say if you are writing, for example, Python uses print. If you are using Java, we use system.out.println. If you are using C++, we use cout. In PHP, we all use the word echo. In PHP, we use the word echo. Echo means echo out the output on your browser screen. And whatever you write here will be displayed on your browser. So C++, for example, C++, Objective-C or Java are what are known as compiled languages. We compile those codes. Interpreted languages like PHP, JavaScript, they are directly interpreted and read by the browser. They are not compiled like HTML, CSS, JavaScript. Similarly, PHP code doesn't again require compiling. Okay, we write the code in our notepad, we execute it directly on the browser or using the server. Obviously, we will explore the mechanism, but you do not compile the code. Okay, the code is not compiled, it is directly interpreted. There are mechanisms like Java, C, which are considered as hybrid nowadays. Python, some part are executed directly, some scripts are executed directly or interpreted, and some are now basically compiled and then interpreted or then executed. Okay, but this is again a history.